Hey everybody, it's Drac from DDO Players here, and we have a special edition of DDO Players News where we have the executive producer Severlin here today. Also with us, we have community manager Cordovan, and I ask a special guest Saba Jade to join us as well.
Hello.
So we're going to get started off with Severlin. Just ask him. First question is, what exactly does your job entail being the executive producer?
It's a good question. So basically, I keep the DDO ship sailing in whatever capacity that it requires, including talking with vendors and talking with the team and helping them determine the direction of the game and dealing with all of the sort of behind-the-scenes details that are required. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes total sense. Okay, and then I think the first question for you, we'll give you an easy one that I'm sure you're probably not going to be the answer, so we'll give you the softball one first. Is there any timeline or hints that you're going to give for what the next classic module will be? We've been getting a lot of people asking us about that.
Any timeline as to when we will get information on it?
Yes,
Yeah.
Either when we'll get information or what it'll be.
The next big classic module is coming out probably, if everything goes to plan, next Halloween and is appropriate for that time.
Ooh.
Wow.
Ooh, I like that hint. Awesome.
In terms of when we'll probably hear more, next year sometime? Probably first half of the year sometime? That's about the best I think we could probably say at this point.
Hey, that's good enough for me. That's more than I figured we'd get, so I appreciate that. And then speaking, I guess, to go along with that, for the Temple of Elemental Evil, you did have Will Wheaton as the special DM. So do you guys have any more plans to maybe try to do that again with, a quote-unquote celebrity to do DM voices? Or was that just kind of like a one-off thing that just happened to be able to do for the Temple?
So a lot of that comes with opportunity. It's not only us wanting it, but an opportunity of finding someone who we think is really cool and would do a good job who's interested, right? Mm-hmm. So, yes, we'd like to do it in the future, but a lot of it has to do with, people we encounter at trade shows or at cons or people we contact that happen to have free time. And so it's not something that we will throw in to specific things. Like we don't have a schedule of, next year we'll have 2 guest DM voices, but rather we keep the doors open for opportunities.
Okay, excellent. My last question that I have personally is, we do know that gnomes are coming with update 30, but are there any plans for maybe any other new races or classes coming, or is that just something that's on the table that if it happens, it happens?
Well, right now, we definitely want to put in gnomes. We'd like to put in deep gnomes. And the big discussion is, should deep gnome just be a race, or should it be some kind of iconic? That's the hard thing for us to decide, because if we do deep gnome iconic, we can make it more Forgotten Realm feeling, and then they can start in Forgotten Realms as opposed to, starting in Korthos, for example. So that's the big thing. After that, the next race we'd like to do is probably a Tiefling and the Asimar.
Oh yes.
But first we have to execute on the gnome and see, because we haven't done a race in a long time, especially and this team, most of the team has never done one, so we have to see what the schedule is in terms of getting it implemented. And then the Tiefling has 2 big problems. I don't think we'd have a problem with the Asimar, but the Tiefling has horns, which means we'd have to create horn options that clip through helmets so that they look like the helmets have holes. Does that make sense?
Yep.
And then how to implement the tail. So you kind of, it's hard to find a good way to implement something, and if it's just kind of sticking out and doesn't have motion, it's just not as cool. So we'd almost want it animated, but that requires us to modify.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special report.
Hey everybody, it is Drac in post-editing. Just wanted to add a little note here that at this point in the interview we did have a little bit of difficulties with Severlin's microphone. It did cut out there. We just picked up right where it left off, so we apologize for his thoughts on the Tiefling. Kind of got cut off a little bit, but we did pick right back up with the interview. Thanks.
In more relation to that, do players want more new races or more new classes? Because, to me it doesn't matter. Whatever you guys put out, I play with it. But I don't know what the general consensus is for player base.
It's my
The-
understanding that yes, the answer to that question is yes.
So they want both.
Yeah. The question on races is there's still some popular races that can be rounded out. But after Warlock, the question is, what would we do with another class? Would we do something like a Hexblade? Or would we go, I mean, like one of the things we've discussed far, far in the future would be, do we want to do something where we have a psionic update and have like psionic classes, but implementing more than one class in the same update and all the subsystems behind psionics would be really tough.
Right.
Yeah. The other problem we have with that is psionic's big shtick in 3.5 was it basically uses a variation of mana. The spell, it uses points to cast the spells instead of slots. Since we already do that with casters, how do we differentiate, psionics and still stay true to what players would expect and have fun? So those are all, different things that we would think of in terms of if we did do new classes, which we'd love to do, what would be the next one? That's one of the questions that we have.
Well, I think the most exciting thing you said about that is that you're thinking far, far into the future, right?
Exactly.
We want this going on. My first question is, do you guys have any plans to make changes to some of the older raids? And I don't even mean just older raids like Deathworm and Fire on Thunder Peaks as well. Because I've been trying to get my Deathworms in to get to 20, and it's really tough. There are no LFMs for those things. I get to run with my guild, luckily, but it's going to take another 7 weeks for me. I have 13. It's going to take 7 more weeks to get up to 20. Anything like increased drop rates, more XP, something to get the player base to actually want to run their older raids?
Yes, we have. What we have is, do you know the cool group bonus event where the more people in your party, the more XP you get?
Sure.
We have a raid version. That we can put out that we haven't yet, but we've been discussing like when is a good time to do that.
Thanksgiving.
As a matter of fact, I have actually permission from Filero to get the word out about this. So yes, as a matter of fact, Thanksgiving weekend, we are going to be having a buddy weekend where we're going to be doing a plus 5% raid bonus. So that'll give you up to plus 55% with a full raid group, and then a plus 10% on parties. So that'll be up to a plus 50% bonus for parties.
Oh, nice.
And that's going to begin, I think technically our marketing is from, say, that Thursday of Thanksgiving through that Sunday. Reality, I think it's going to start sometime probably Wednesday afternoon.
Oh, that's cool.
So just, because we want to turn it on, not when we're eating turkey and watching TV or whatever. So, but yeah, so I actually was given permission to get the word out about that, and that's next week. So yeah,
Excellent.
yeah.
All right, all you Argo people, I want to run Deathworm.
Let
over
me just say,
Thanksgiving.
by the way, I happen to know that I am going to be running Temple of the Deathworm on Sunday night on Argonescence, so maybe we should hook up after
Yeah,
the
with
show.
my guild.
Yeah. Well, is that with your guild?
Well, I know in my one of my chat channels, this one guy keeps saying, "Hey, Cordovan is going to come on."
Okay, well, it probably is then with your guild. Okay, yeah.
A question one of my guildies on a different server and I were talking about is, what percentage of the player base contributes to the forums, and are there other ways that you guys get feedback for things, such as the new XP curve that you guys are thinking of?
I suppose it's probably maybe more an answer for me since I'm
Okay.
That's what I was thinking, essentially.
Yeah. Yes, we do have an idea of what percentage of the player base contributes to the forums. Historically, it's not really information that we've distributed. I guess I would say, in a general terms, it is probably larger than some people think. Historically, we've heard only a couple percentage points of the players go to the forums, and that's just not true. That's really never been true. It's always been higher than that. There is a difference, however, if you're asking. It depends on how you slice the data, right? Because it's actually a more complicated question than you'd think. If the question was how many people read the forums, then it's a very large percentage. If it's a matter of how many people who read the forums contribute to the forums, it's a much smaller percentage. There's a lot of people out there who read the forums for their information, but don't necessarily do a lot of posting, or maybe they post just a couple of times a year or something like that. So in terms of what percentage of the player base contributes to the forums in terms of actually making posts, it is a relatively small percentage, but they tend to be representative of fairly large groups of opinions and people. So, you can't just say, well, just because the one guy said we need to do this, then that's just one guy. Well, that one guy probably represents a lot more than one guy, And but in terms of the actual sort of general percentage, it's higher than I think historically has been put out there on the forums. In terms of other ways we get feedback for things, we absolutely, the forums is a very important way, but is by no means the only way that we get our feedback. We are very active on virtually every other social network, everything from Facebook to Twitter, Google+, Twitch, YouTube. In fact, we even have a Pinterest page. I'm in game a lot. We read our general chats. We go on Lemania. We put together lists of things that people say on Lemania when they're talking to us. We do dev chats on Lemania. We have the Players Council, as well, which is sort of a subgroup. We do periodically over the years, we have done, say, surveys, questionnaires, things like that. So there's a lot of ways that we get feedback outside of just the forums. Although, I don't want to minimize the importance of the forum community either, because they are clearly a very representative voice of the community.
One last thing I have is I'm not a fan of the bravery bonus. Is it here to stay?
Well, one of the things we tried to do is mitigate it by letting you turn it off for a time. I think that we would rather have people be able to go and do new content at a lower until they get used to it and then work up to elite. So you can go and turn your bravery bonus off, do the content you want, and then turn it back on and you won't ruin your bravery streak. The reason we didn't remove it entirely is, one is we were concerned about people would feel that we're trying to cut back on their XP, but really there's a lot of players who really like a bragging right of just my bravery streak is this big, right? Like I've done this many elite dungeons, and we didn't want to take that away from them without really going through and being able to either give them something else, and then it would be like, well, how do we sort of move the bravery streak they already have going into whatever this new system is? So I think that by allowing the bravery streak to be turned off for a time so that you can go and do content on a lower, like so you can help guildies or even do pugs without worrying about your bravery streak going away. We definitely hear you on that and have taken steps to helping that.
I understand what you're saying there. I'm not quite a fan of the bravery bonus at all. I don't mean by turning it off. I just not a fan. And I think it's kind of funny that people have that bragging thing going on, but a counter would do that too. But all right, on to the next one. Go ahead, Draft.
Well, let me just briefly say that when we have had proposals to adjust bravery bonus, we heard very loudly and clearly from the people who do very much care for their bravery streaks and would be very, very upset were those streaks to suddenly go away. So that was one of the reasons why we did the thing that we did.
That is the cool thing about DDO. We have such a wide range of players that are playing. There are people that want to be, like gods when they go out. They want to be able to smash through content. And then there are people who want to take their time going through content. So that's one of the things I enjoy about DDO, because there are different kinds of quests to take advantage of, to let people play the way they want to play.
Yep, understood. And you're, like I was just saying in the earlier question, your opinion is not alone. So there are people who like it, there are people who don't, and the development thing we have to do is try to balance the desires of all those people to the best of our ability.
Before we go on, sorry, I have one more question. I'm a fan of multiple ways to achieve a quest. Are there any plans to make so you could have two endings, one where people who love that big fight at the end, or other where you can have that path, or another path where you solve puzzles or sneak your way past, or so you don't have to have the big fight, but you'd still get the same objective completed?
A lot of that is left to the individual contributor in terms of the devs working on dungeons. I mean, we've done that in the past with the Volker adventure in the Red Fens, for instance, where you have a sneak through. Yeah, we'd like to do more of that. The issue that we run into is this. If we do two paths, it becomes difficult because that could have been two dungeons.
Oh.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
So, right, that takes twice as much dev time. So what's better? Doing two dungeons so that you have less combat dungeons and more combat dungeons, or doing a single dungeon with two paths? And that's sort of the design design dilemma we fight with as we go through and work on this. I'm sorry I interrupted you.
No, I understand what you're saying. As a person who likes the alternate paths, there are some days I want to go and do that fight, and there are other days I don't. So I would see it as two different dungeons. But I can understand somebody who wants to be in there fighting all the time. They would only see it as one dungeon taking twice the dev time. So I understand what you're saying.
But that doesn't mean we're not going to do it. But a lot of it comes to sort of the individual creativity of the of various people working on it, and essentially how long. For instance, we tend to divide dungeons into a normal dungeon, and the dev has sort of X amount of time to do it. And then sort of like someone has a lot of creative energy and is like, I want to do a sort of super elite dungeon, so I want to take twice as long to implement this dungeon. And, so we schedule that, and that dungeon is going to be of a higher quality. I mean, obviously we don't want all the dungeons to feel exactly the same, or the players will get, we'll get bored.
Right.
So we do that and set aside times for sort of prestige dungeons, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
A dungeon that is just, we have a lot more development, and it has a lot more things to push or press, or puzzles to solve, and jumpy puzzles maybe, and all of that.
Let's switch gears here. I asked on our site and on the forum some questions for you. I know we're kind of pressed for time here, so we'll see how many of these we can get through. First one is going to be from the forums. A Varguil asks, could we get some cookies in the developer pit? We like cookies. Chocolate pleases almost everyone, right?
I've severely cut back on sugar to try to keep my tummy a little smaller, so I think that the answer to that would be whoever this Vargul is. Absolutely not.
Okay, I'm sure he'll be happy to hear that. And
I hope whoever this person might be, I haven't offended him.
We'll have to schedule cookie baking time in the next sprint.
There you go. Then over on our site, DDO Central asks, will there ever be another paid expansion for DDO? If you are not planning one, is this due to cost, lack of interest in the community, or just some other reason?
I don't want to. The hard part about answering this is that it doesn't open up options for us. It closes up options. We don't ever plan it. Like, I think that if I wanted to do an expansion and sort of group everything into an expansion, that I'd rather do a free one. That way more players could engage in it. If we do a paid expansion, what ends up happening is it splits the player base.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
So I think we'd rather do a free one, but just have cool stuff that the players would want to engage in the store with as part of it, rather than doing a paid one. So expansion, maybe. Paid, maybe, but probably not, is my current answer to that. But anything could change.
Then from the forums, Virtual Gib asks, he's mentioned it a time or two in various places before, but he would be interested in hearing Seb's thoughts on giving mob healers the ability to raise dead mobs.
So have monsters be able to raise dead monsters that you killed?
Yeah, that's insane to me, but yeah. That would be crazy, but I would kind of like to hear your thoughts on that.
My current thought is that sounds like a cool idea. We'd love to do it. We'd love to experiment with it on a one-off dungeon or something, or maybe a specific kind of creature, but it would require a lot of tech. We'd have to go through and make sure that the creature spawned in the right place, and that the spell was cast and that the characters could detect defeated foes. And the detection of defeated foes is a whole system that just doesn't exist right now. We certainly don't want them ray tracing around the dungeon looking for bodies, because that would be a terrible server drain. In fact, we just fixed the ray tracing code to be much more efficient, so we wouldn't want to do that. So after all of that, let's say that we had a way that monsters could sort of track in their spawned group defeated foes and try to bring them back to life by respawning. After all of that, I suspect that the feedback of a large amount of players would be, some would be, oh, this is cool, but a lot of amount of players would be like, oh, I hate when they bring creatures I've already defeated back. So do we want to spend that much tech time on something that has a high chance of not being popular? it's tough to say. I don't want to. I think that for some people it would be cool, and I think part of the way it would be popular is sort of the design of how it's implemented.
Mhm.
If all creatures did it, obviously people would get sick of it quick. If an occasional creature did it, then it might be cool, and we could certainly have a boss creature do it just through scripting now by kind of cheating the system. But to do an overall system like that, I think that I would spend all of that tech time on something that would be more universally affect gameplay rather than something so specific as raising the dead.
Over on our site, Mock Taskmaster asks, it seems that Neverwinter is getting a lot of love from Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro. DDO does get some, or it did in the recent past. Is there still a significant collaboration on new content going forward? New adventure paths, whatever Wizards of the Coast calls for them, coming to DDO.
I love them, and we have tons of collaboration. Other than that, because it's an outside vendor, I really can't talk about it.
Right,
Because it's just against company policy. I'm happy with our collaboration with Wizards. I love them. We have a great relationship. So I don't think anyone has anything to fear along those lines.
From the forums, Kevin Mullins asked, will there be an update of all event items, example Crystal Cove, to the level 30 with the level cap increase?
That's a good question. What'll probably happen is as festivals come up, we'll have to decide with each one whether we want to update the items for level 30 or not. Some of them we may not, because we may not want, say, the best level 30 items to come from a festival right away. So for a Crystal Cove, we may wait to update it purposely so that the players will continue concentrating on sort of the level 30 stuff that we already have in there. The other thing is we have to make sure that all of those monsters and such get put up so that they're of an appropriate difficulty before we sort of update the loot. So what will probably happen is as each one comes up, we'll have to make a decision on a per basis. But I wouldn't expect the festivals to start being updated until level 30, at least until late summer, so we can concentrate on new level 30 content.
I would just add that it's always a scheduling concern as well, because the same amount of resources that goes to, say, updating the Crystal Cove loot to level 30 would be the same resources that would need to be carved out to make named loot for whatever new content was coming out as well. So you have to try to balance the amount of work that might be involved with Crystal Cove with whatever other content you're doing as well. Maybe have a few less items over on one side so that you can add a few more to the other side, that kind of thing. And so it's always a bit of a give and take on event loot and that as well.
Right. Like, let me give you an example of something the players will never see. We've added a significant new amount of tech to make items easier to make for Update 29. And it allows, like, behind-the-scenes effects to scale in ways that they couldn't before. When we go to update, say, Crystal Cove loot, we have to make a hard decision of, do we create the new tier of loot the old way, or do we try to update the Crystal Cove items to use the new loot system? So where the players say, well, you only have to make one more tier of loot, actually, after our Update 29, there's going to be probably a significant decision to make about upfront work of whether we want to sort of retrofit the loot to work with the new system, or just continue using the old effect system to do that, if that makes sense.
And I actually just thought of a question related to update or level 30 increase. Was there a reason that you did update or level 30, on update 29 and not update 30?
Oh no!
Oh my! The history of update 29. So there's a long. At one point, we were going to call the Night Revels update 29 and then have level 30 update 30, because for one reason I refer to that as the 30 update because we're going up to level 30, and it would have been so nice. But then we started running into a whole bunch of problems. For instance, if the Night Revels is update 29, we would actually have to have an official update 29 title. But because it was outside our normal scheduled release, that all has to be approved by a number of systems that are just not us. So we didn't actually have a name for an update 29. And then we went back and forth of how confused would the players be if there wasn't an update 29, and there was that discussion. So you are beginning to see the beginnings of like a long series of discussions on the naming and whether we would have a level 30 be update 30. There was even talk from QA that they favored we don't have an update 29. We just name this update 30 and sort of hand wave the whole thing. But marketing was concerned that would be confusing as well. So yes, there was perhaps far too much discussion on naming the level 30 update 30.
And then over on the forums, Arcanis asked, will goblins ever come to DDO? Iconic monster in most campaigns, shocked they were never introduced.
We could do them, but they're so low level and we have so much good low level content that we would need an excuse to, although I guess we get good use out of kobolds. There's no reason that we couldn't bring, as far as I know, goblins over. And we that is a creature that we could talk to Art about importing into DDO. I don't actually know the history on why they didn't.
I actually do
include
know
goblins.
a little history because I remember back in DDO Cast, I asked that question a while
Mhm.
back. One of the, when we're working on new monsters, we already have a lot of monsters that serve the goblin role, so to speak. Kobolds and orcs and hobgoblins. Perhaps an argument could be made that even trolls, to some extent, fit that role. And so when we're looking at developing a new monster, maybe we would want to develop a monster that would offer a different gameplay experience or a different role in the game. That's what we might be seeing, for a future monster, that sort of thing. And so that's largely been the hang-up on that is, okay, well, we're going to do a new monster. Which one should we do? Do we want to do goblins, which, yeah, I think everyone agrees that they're cool, very iconic monsters in D&D, or do we want, but they can already be served by several other sort of mobs, or do we want to focus on something, that's more specifically new and interesting to the game? Not that goblins wouldn't be, but you know what I mean. Yeah.
And plus, usually content drives new monster creation, not vice versa. So a lot of new creatures are created because there's a need from content to fill a niche. And if there's not that need, then there's no sort of push into Art in order to get it.
Okay, and DDO Central over on our site asks, is there any plans to implement housing into DDO? Because Lotro has a pretty good housing system, so will we ever see it in DDO?
We've had discussions on it, but the discussions, I don't want to say yes or no, because again, we don't want to close or open any doors, but here's the crux of the discussion. Will personal housing take away from guild housing? I mean, we already have these really cool airships, which are impressive looking and kind of unique to the game, and they have all of these amenities that you can swap and get tons of stuff from. What would be in housing that you couldn't get from your guild airship? I mean,
storage, that's what they're looking at, right?
I would think probably storage, yeah, that would be. Because, I play Lotro, and to me, your airship is basically your house. It's about the same thing, other than there's more storage available in Lotro in the housing. That's the only big difference to me.
You can also get drunk and pass out and wake up somewhere else.
Well, that's true. We need kegs to drink from to, port us places.
Now, to talk to a different kind of player, I think that there is a sort of player that would love the customizability and the feeling of a home base, but don't feel that they have the agency to do things in their guild ship because basically the decisions are made by the guild leaders. So that they would like the customization of sort of having a hall where they can put trophies and they can move things around. And then instead of having one person in the guild that handles that, every player have their own sort of decision-making process and a place that they can sort of call their own and show off stuff. And if we ever did player housing, I think that would be sort of the player activity that we'd be looking for, is to give each player sort of the same experience that maybe the guild leaders get when they're decorating their airship.
From the forums, Permaban asked, target or timetable goal for completing the class adjustment.
So
For
I'd like
completing?
For completing, I mean, we'd like to finish them next year, but at the rate we're doing them, we may slip into 2017, is my guess.
I would also
Which
put
one?
a caveat that they're never really technically done, right? I mean, if we
Right.
need to adjust a class in the future, we're going to do it. So
It's
Can
an
you say
ongoing
which one you're working
process.
on next?
Fighter. The only reason that Fighter wasn't done this time is because the person who's going to work on it has a lot of. There's just so much system stuff in the in the sort of going up to level 30 and doing all of the end game stuff that we couldn't get in. But so the nice thing about Fighter is 2 of the trees have been done recently. We just need to tweak them to make sure that it's as fun running a Fighter Vanguard as it is a Paladin one. Hopefully the Fighter feats will help with that, but there's probably a little more work to do. And then we have to do Kensei, so not only is it competitive, but we want Kensei to also support heavy armor fighters. Like right now it's kind of a strange beast because it really supports sort of monk fighter hybrids and light armor fighters, but as your only DPS tree, that's really not the iconic fighter roles. We want to have multi-selectors and such. So there's a lot of work on doing that. So it'll go fighters, and then we'll see from there. I mean, the 2 big ones, obviously, that we have to hit up are Druid, because we have to go through and fix all the form stuff, and Monk, because we have to go through and make hand wraps work with everything, because there's just way too much stuff that hand wraps don't work with. Then the Favored Soul needs another tree. We'd like to do Cleric Domains, but that's further down our list. And then Artificers are a little behind Mechanics now, so we want to touch them. I know that Steel Star loves and has a lot of creative energy for doing some Artificer stuff. So as soon as we're done with 30, I think that we're going to try to move ahead on that, maybe even faster than we have. So hopefully that will pick up pace again.
And Trelake is asking, are there any plans concerning unimplemented or unobtainable favor rewards? For example, PDK 12 and House P Master Repairsman.
Sure. When we have good, our current strategy for that is when we have something that we want to place in favor, then we look at the favor things, rather than saying, hey, here are favor things, let's come up with something the players may or may not like to fill them. But if there was a giant player movement that they really wanted that stuff filled, then we could look at that further. I know that there's been certainly some talk about it, and it's on our radar. But right now, I want to get through all of the level 30 stuff and finish the class passes, and then we'll hit that up again.
Dunkelzan asked, will we ever see any plans to revamp the UI, maybe to include like the UI scaling, skin AP back in place, that sort of thing?
The scaling stuff is on my list because it exists in Lotro, and we just haven't had time to look at moving it over. If we're lucky, it will be only a moderate amount of work to sort of import it in DDO and get it working. But so far, when I've made bets on something that seems complicated being a moderate amount of work, I've lost those bets. So I'm a little concerned. But that's one thing that we'd like to do. Reincarnation, we'd like to make it much easier to do, because right now it's clunky. We'd rather have the players be able to sort of set up their whole reincarnation up front, and then once it checks everything, they can hit accept, and it all kind of does it at once. That way you can swap in and out levels and such, but that's a really big amount of work. So that's another thing that we want to look at too.
And Propane asked on the forums, what are the next big plans after E-Shroud?
Well, we have an anniversary that we have to make sure that all of the players celebrate with us. So that will be fun. Obviously, Gnome will be part of that. And then we have some cool stuff coming up next year that I don't have a lock on my office door, so I'm afraid to talk about too much before they come for me.
Hopefully we'll be able to talk a little bit more about that around the time of the next producer's letter.
And that actually brings up our next question. JetRoll asks, is there a timetable for game updates beyond this year? And will we see a new executive producer letter from Seb following the rollout of U29?
Soon. Once 29 comes out, since really it's a giant update for us, we'll be working on a producer's letter talking about what we have planned for the anniversary and next year. And yes, the whole next year, we have a lot of good ideas and an initial schedule. But the thing about a producer's letter is we want to retain the ability to change direction based on how the players are feeling and what their feedback is. It's hard to tell sometime. Let's say that we lay out all next year for the players, and then we decide that there's a lot of talk about there isn't enough, there's too much. I know this is going to sound weird, but let's say that we do such a good job that there are people saying there's too much endgame content, you're only doing endgame stuff, and there isn't enough new stuff for people who like to TR. Then all of a sudden our focus needs to change. if the end game players are all fairly busy, and if we've already laid out the entire year, sometimes it's hard because the players don't like us to say things and then not do them, which I don't blame them, and I don't like saying things and not doing them as well. So there'll always be a vagueness because of that, a planned vagueness in, well, what are you doing next year? Well, we want to hit the big beats, but we also want to leave stuff open. The other thing that we don't want to talk about is, one of the reasons we don't want to talk about content too much is some of it we want to be a surprise. So if we're implementing a big storyline like we have been with Eretrikos, we don't want to basically tell you, hey, the storyline is going to have this, this, and this in it and be done on this date, because we want the players to sort of experience the story as it comes out rather than already knowing what's going to happen.
Follows that question up with, how do you think you have done with accomplishing your goals from your last producer letter?
Some of the stuff got shuffled around. So in terms of just accomplishing the goals, absolutely. In terms of content, I think that I could have a lot of improvement. Certain things that we moved into next year, like sentient weapons, because sentient weapons got moved because we didn't feel that it would add to green steel. We think that trying to put sentient weapons right before green steel would be a mistake. Putting sentient weapons into green steel would be a mistake. And having sentient weapons right after green steel would be a mistake, because either one would eclipse the other system or both would combine to be sort of this. It had, let's just say it had design challenges having both come out at the same time. So sentient weapons, which we talked about, went past. So I think in terms of giving players reasons to re-examine their builds, we've done a pretty good job, although it's slower than I'd like. In terms of responding to content, I would have liked to improve a lot on that, because we said stuff that we then pushed out, and I think we had good reasons to, but I think that we could have executed better on that. But overall, I think the team has done well in terms of content, the cadence at which content came out. We did like 6 big updates this year, which is pretty good, including a new class, and Temple of Elemental Evil was big. Is a big system, and I think that this next update is really large. It's not an expansion level update, but it's fairly good.
I would say it's pretty close to an expansion with what all you have planned for it.
Yeah,
and it's probably going to be really popular because people love all those things that you're updating this time.
Yeah, that's our goal. So I think overall, in terms of have we executed well as a game, I think I would give us higher marks than have we done what Seb said in his producer's letter, and that's probably my fault.
Well, it's also, I think, a really good indication of, nothing that was in that producer's letter was not our plan for the year at the time the producer's letter came out. But as the year develops, and we do respond to the needs and desires of the community and that sort of thing, things change, right? And so I think, maybe the producer's letter, rather than being sort of a chiseled in stone, here's exactly what you can expect for 2016, should be, hey, it's towards the end of 2015, heading into 2016, here's what we're currently thinking. And I think that's maybe the attitude that needs to go into it a little bit.
Yeah, and part of it is also I tend towards that style of producing. Other producers may be much more, here's what we're doing next year, and we're doing this, and we're going to deliver on this, where I'm more, I'd rather have the freedom to respond to how the players are reacting to things and sort of steer the ship based on player feedback and see what the players are talking about and excited about at that time, and be able to move the team in that way. And that's sort of a stylistic thing that some players may really like, and some players may prefer the other thing. So it's always a difficult thing to keep everybody happy along those lines.
All right. Well, I think that is going to wrap it up, because I know you have stuff to do. You're busy working on update 29, so I don't want to keep you any longer.
Great. Hey, I wanted to thank you for having me on and asking me all these cool questions and listening to me ramble on about the answers.
No problem. We appreciated you taking some time out, and you as well, Cordovan. I know you're off to do your Fridays at 4 stream, so
I am.
We need to let you go as well.
No, I appreciate it. Thanks for doing DDO Players News, and thank you very much, Saba, for the Damsels of DDO as well. It's a great show. So
yeah, thank you.
Yep. Thanks for coming on, Saba. And we will be releasing this as a special edition of the podcast. It'll show up on our feed for our iTunes and as well as our YouTube stream as soon as I can get it edited. So look for that soon. We'll talk to you guys later.
Thanks.
Bye.